But let's start with the Deputy Leader of the Reform Party, Ben Habib. Good morning, Ben.
Good morning, Matt. Good to be on with you.
It's good to.
I don't see myself as howling from the sidelines. But
You're not really a howler, are you? You're a neatly dressed former businessman. But howls of outrage is what Reform UK, let's face it, is all about, isn't it? I just want to.
Do you think it is?
I think I really do. I think that's really the DNA of your party. But also, as Nigel Farage has said, you are now poised to become, you think you might be poised to become the official Her Majesty's loyal opposition to a Labour government, if that's what happens. So let's just go through some of the because in that role, you will have to have a whole number of policies on a whole number of issues, which aren't your stock in trade. So there is a Reform UK draft manifesto out there, which I've had a look at this morning. And I just want to go through a couple of things, because it looks like an extraordinarily optimistic wish list. Cut NHS waiting lists to 0 in 2 years. Well, that would be nice. How are you going to do that?
So there are a number of steps that we would take to do that. Our principal policy is to remove from the basic rate of tax frontline NHS staff, so that first of all, you retain more people. I don't know if you're aware of that, but 15 to 20,000 doctors every year leave the NHS. And if you reduce the burden of tax on them, they'd stay. It should also attract more staff who've left frontline services back into frontline. They've gone into admin or they've retired, and they can come back out of retirement. You might recall a lot of doctors took early retirement because the pension scheme, the way it worked for their pension schemes, incentivize them to do so. So they may come back into frontline service. And it's all about getting people on the front line.
It's about incentives, isn't it? You're trying to incentivize them by, with tax breaks to come back into the services that they're leaving in droves. I get the logic behind that. But if I look further down the line, it's a generous draft manifesto. Scrap stamp duty on properties under 750,000 quid. Very nice. Inheritance tax abolished for estates under 2 million quid. Very nice if you've got that kind of money. Then you've got raised VAT threshold, abolish IR35, reduce corporation tax, nationalise utility companies. I mean, if you tot everything up, scrap student loan interest, these are all things I can imagine lots of people really wanting. The big question at the end of it, especially to you, Ben Habib, as a businessman, right? You know about numbers, you're numerate.
Yeah.
How on earth will you pay for any of this? This makes Liz Truss's disastrous mini-budget look like a frugal festive gruel.
Well, I want to come back to the principle of fully funded tax cuts. But before I come back to that principle, we have approached our manifesto on the basis of a fully funded manifesto. And the two principal savings that we have are the ditching of net zero, which by the Treasury's own admission would cost the Exchequer £1.4 trillion between 2019, when that estimate was made, and 2050, when net zero is meant theoretically to have been achieved. That works out at about £50 billion a year in savings. We've assumed 30 in our manifesto, £30 billion a year. The other area of saving, which people may not be aware of...
So you're going to sacrifice the planet for the sake of a few tax cuts, are you?
No, it's not sacrificing the planet. The climate change, anthropogenic climate change, and net zero they're not synonymous. You don't protect the planet by going bust. You don't protect the planet by turning your back on abundant North Sea gas that's available to the British people, and instead importing. Now, we've got this ridiculous situation where we turned off our North Sea gas extraction to a very significant extent, got rid of our storage facilities, which are very hard to restart once you've done that. And now we're importing liquefied natural gas from the United States of America. We've turned ourselves from energy independent, as far as gas is concerned, to energy dependent, which is an extremely vulnerable position in which to put a country, and losing all that money out of our coffers at the same time.
Right, but I still don't see.
Our principle.
I still don't see how you can afford all these things that you want to do, even by scrapping your green agenda, any green agenda completely. It just doesn't. I don't think these numbers really add up. I mean, there's another one here, for instance.
It does, Matt. It does add up. It does add up.
Well,
It does add up.
why have you not put those
Because
costings
the
in your
other
draft
big area,
manifesto? They're not in your draft manifesto.
We have. They are. They are. You might recall when the banks were bailed out, the Bank of England bought their bonds and gave them cash. Those cash reserves were not earning the banks much cash, much interest at all when interest rates were zero. The Bank of England is now paying out 30 to 40 billion.
Okay. You know what, Ben, your line is...
and we would remove that.
Okay. Tell you what, Ben, your line is a little bit dodgy. I want to get back to you. We're going to try and get a better line up. And while we do that, I'm going to go to Scarlett Maguire, Director of the polling company JL Partners. Good morning, Scarlett.
Good morning.
You heard Ben Habib there sound... Well, we didn't get onto the kind of the opinion polls with him. We'll do that later on. And the macro picture. How justified is Reform UK, is Nigel Farage in claiming that they could become Her Majesty's loyal opposition, play the role that the Labour Party is playing to the Tories at the moment?
It's a bit of a stretch. So far we've had one opinion poll that has placed Reform UK ahead of the Conservatives by 1 point. We had a poll last week as well that put them 1 point behind. A lot of other pollsters have them more significantly behind. In fact, Reform is the biggest pollsters. So some have them as many as 9-10 behind, and then obviously YouGov have them as one ahead.
Right.
So it's far from uncertain they'll overtake Reform, the Conservatives in any more polls. It might happen. I think it's unlikely they even overtake them in the average of polls in a week running up to the election. Let's see what happens to the campaign. Let's see what happens to the Tory campaign. Maybe they'll self-implode sort of further and give Reform the UK the opportunity. But then, okay, putting that aside, even if on election day Reform UK ended up ahead of the Conservatives in terms of national vote share, I think it is still unlikely they would be the party of opposition. In fact, that would most likely go, I think, in those circumstances to Ed Davey.
Yes, I was going to say the Lib Dems are probably in a better position to take over that role than Reform UK, should the Tories do as badly as many people think they will. Scarlett? Hello? Okay. We seem to have a problem with lines this morning, but we'll try and fix all that. Ben, you're back. Are you back with us,
I'm
Ben?
back.
Good,
I'm
excellent.
back.
That's a good old-fashioned dog and bone, and nothing like the telephone as opposed to all this newfangled internet nonsense. I mean, again, just quickly back to numbers. I don't want to just spend the morning with you talking about numbers. Increased police numbers, by how many?
40,000 over 5 years.
Again, that's a lot. How will you pay for that?
That is. Well, our principal savings, as I mentioned, are scrapping net zero, which is somewhere between 30 and 50 billion pounds a year saving, and for the Treasury, and removing the huge benefit that banks get of their deposits accruing interest from the Bank of England. These are deposits created for the commercial banks, having bailed them out. So, that would save another 30 to 40 billion a year. And on top of that,
but just on the 30 billion you're going to save a year from ditching net zero, I mean, is that actually the amount of money being spent by the government, or that would be spent by the Labour Party, both of which have scaled back their net zero commitments considerably? I think that number is something that you fished out from the kind of from the treasure trove of the recent past, as opposed to something that's actually current and relevant.
This is a Treasury estimate for the loss to the Exchequer. So we're just taking government figures. Philip Hammond published this when Theresa May took it upon herself in the dying days of her prime ministerial position to pass into law our commitment to net zero. Do you remember that in July 2019? Philip Hammond was against it, and he came out with a £1.4 trillion estimate to get us to net zero by 2050. And by the way, the government never, ever over-eggs a figure. If anything, we're going to spend a hell of a lot more than 1.4 trillion in our attempts to get there, assuming we ever do get there.
What about abolishing the Home Office? Why would you abolish the Home Office?
Well, we will have to repurpose it to actually make it do its job.
But it says here, abolish the Home Office. I mean, what have you got against the Home Office? Especially a party that's very keen on monitoring who comes into this country, who's legit, who's not legit.
We need border force for that. We need border force for that.
Yeah, okay. Well, let's get to your own constituency. So you ran in a by-election in Wellingborough. That was the constituency that had been held by Peter Bone, who, of course, went another way, as it were. And that stonking majority that he had of 18,000 was then reduced to a Labour majority of 13,000. You came third in that by-election after the Conservatives, who came second. Yeah. You're just going to basically split the right-wing vote, aren't you, and allow Labour to get that seat? That's what's
Well,
going to
no, I
happen.
don't think it's right. I mean, I think people keep looking at the polls as if there's some kind of stagnant picture of where the country's at, and forgetting that they're dynamic. And if you look at where reform was in October 2023, we were polling 5%. I then got quite a significant staging post in Wellingborough by-election at 13%. And then Blackpool South in May, a couple of months ago, we got...
But you're not going to win, are you, Ben? You're not going to win that seat,
17%.
let's face it. You're not going to win that seat.
Why not? It's
Because
a Brexit seat.
Because pigs don't fly. I mean, this, and you're doing very well
Matt,
in the polls, but you're not going to do that well.
But Matt, if I were to take your argument to its logical conclusion, no one would ever try to do anything which looked remotely demanding. Of course, it's an uphill struggle, but I'm only in politics because I think the country faces some very, very significant threats from the way that it's being governed. And the only way to put that right is to have a go at doing it.
Okay.
You're not going to do it by, as you say, howling at the television or sitting in your, on your sofa. You've got to get up and do something about it, haven't you?
Okay. And finally, Ben, if Nigel Farage is elected in Clacton, do you expect him to defect to the Tory party, and would you welcome that?
I have no expectations of him defecting to the Tory party, and if he did, I certainly would not welcome it.
Really?
I would not welcome it.
Even if it means that he might become leader of the Tory party at some stage?
We're not a pressure group for the Conservative Party. We are our own party. People keep thinking we're some sort of surrogate for the Tories, some sort of pressure group or weather vane, and as soon as there's a rapprochement, we'll all just capitulate and join them. No. We are an independent party, and we have a very different agenda to the Tories. You've just been through our manifesto.
Yeah.
It's quite different.
By the way, I won't get into it now because I want to get back to Scarlett, but I did notice the absence of a word that starts with B. It's called Brexit. Do you remember that? Do you remember Brexit happened a few years ago? Do you remember that at all? Do you have any idea what Brexit was?
I remember it.
Yeah, you remember it. How swimmingly is that going, right? And why is that not going quite as well as you thought?
But Matt, we didn't get Brexit.
When we voted
to leave. No,
yes.
Well, I've been fighting this Northern Irish cause.
I know, because you say it's not the purest of pure Brexits.
It's not pure. We've left 1.8 million people behind under laws made by a foreign legislature enforced by a foreign court.
Okay. All right.
That is not Brexit.
All right. Okay, we're going to leave it there. That's a discussion for another day. Ben Habib, thank you very much indeed. And of course, you get the full list of candidates for that seat in Wellingborough on lbc.co.uk/candidates.